The Collector by John Fowles. So, John Fowles was a pretty big name in 20th century literature, although I had never read any of his books. But I decided it was time to remedy that, and this book, The Collector, was his debut. And so I wanted to read this to see how he started, how he came out the gate. And after having done so, I can say he came out the gate hard because this book right here is one of, or maybe the best debut novel I think I have ever read. There are very few debut novels I think that really display such an absolute and total command of the craft. This feels not like the product of a novice, but of a seasoned master. It is that good. We're going to talk about why that is. So, what is The Collector about? What story does it tell? Well, The Collector tells the story of one Frederick Clegg, a young working class Englishman who is quietly deranged. He is very much an outsider. He has no real friends. He is very socially retarded, and he likes to collect butterflies. One day, however, he wins a great deal of money. And with this newfound wealth, he sets his sights on capturing a lovely young woman who he has seen around town named Miranda, and with whom he has become quite infatuated. So one day he abducts Miranda and proceeds to imprison her in the cellar of his house, and what ensues is basically a psychological thriller slash dual character study of these two characters. The book is narrated in the first person, although it alternates between the perspectives of Frederick and Miranda. The book is divided up into different parts, and some of them are narrated by Frederick, and some of them are narrated by Miranda. And they go over the same events, but the real mastery of this book lies in the way that it displays its shifting perspectives between its characters, because I don't think I can think of a book that does that better. This book truly is a masterpiece when it comes to the changing of perspectives in the story. But so Frederick kidnaps Miranda because he has concocted elaborate domestic fantasies involving he and her, in which they live like a married couple, although he does not capture her for sexual purposes. In fact, as it is later revealed, he is far too neurotic in that area to actually perform, so to speak. So he doesn't intend to rape her or molest her, but rather to force her to come to love him and kind of return his um, deranged affections. And he quickly learns that that's not probably going to happen because women don't behave like they do in his mind, and the quickest way to a girl's heart is not actually chloroform. So there's kind of a battle of wills between Frederick and Miranda as she tries to escape, and he's trying to make her love him by lavishing gifts and luxuries on her, trying to buy her love. Um, but this book also functions as a commentary, a pretty in-depth commentary on class divide, because um, Frederick is a member of the working class and Miranda is a member of the upper class. And no one in this book really comes out looking particularly good. The initial section of the book is narrated by Frederick, and so we get his kind of idealized version of Miranda. But then, whenever she takes over narration, we see that she's not quite as rosy as he pictured her. In fact, she is very elitist and snobbish, and she really looks down her nose not only at Frederick but at all those of his class. And this book provides a very interesting and valuable insight into the mindset of that strata of society who like to champion themselves as uh, the defenders of the working class, but really all the while they just sneer at them and don't think they're even fit to lick their boots. Very interesting stuff. But she is an artist, and so much of the book, which is told from her perspective, is given to her evaluating and reevaluating her own life as well as her relationship with a fellow artist, many years her senior, named GP, known only as GP, with whom she kind of has something of an infatuation of her own with, as well as kind of thinking about deeper subjects as well. And this book is one of the most emotionally confusing things I think I've ever read, but that's a good thing because you really don't know where to stand so much in this book because the characters are so complex and fully realized, and that is the highest praise I think I can give it. These characters are as real as they come, and because of that, you see things from both sides. And Frederick is one of the greatest examples of a villain that I think I've ever read in a book because he is perfectly rounded and rendered, but it does not lessen the impact of what he does. You know, with a villain, you want them to be complex enough to seem human and real, but you don't want that to undercut their villainy. And, you know, I think contemporarily things have kind of flopped too much to the sympathetic side of villainy. You can see this with films such as like Joker and Maleficent, where it just kind of portrays the villains to where nothing's really their fault. They're just villainous by happenstance. And so it kind of just defeats the purpose of the character. But this book is not like that. Frederick is incredibly sinister, and that becomes more and more apparent as the book goes on, just how unhinged and dangerous he really is, and just the kind of simmering rage that lurks beneath his kind of unassuming facade. But he is a very dangerous character, but he's also incredibly sympathetic, and you really do kind of pity him, if nothing else, because he's so sad, he's so pathetic, and he is utterly alone. He has absolutely no one that cares about him or that he cares about other than Miranda. And so you really do get a picture, and I think probably a very realistic picture of the kind of person that could do this kind of thing. It's also very prescient in certain ways about his outlook towards sex and women. His very narrow and flawed and ill-informed outlook on that. It kind of rings true with a lot of stuff that you can kind of see on the news. If you know, you know. But yeah, I think John Fowles was kind of ahead of the curve there. But also Miranda is just as human as Frederick, just as well rendered. She is obviously the victim in this scenario, and you feel that, of course. It never changes the fact that she is the victim here, but she's also something of a bitch. Again, she just looks down her nose at the lower classes, at Frederick and all those like him, and she thinks they're just not very intelligent, not very creative, because, you know, she's the artist. She's very cultured and refined, and she views Frederick as very much not so. And so you really do get kind of a much less glamorous look at her than how Frederick imagines her. But this book is impeccably human in its characters. But also, the book has a great central metaphor in it, which it carries to larger and larger extremes. And that metaphor being collection. That's why it's called The Collector. Frederick collects butterflies. He likes to capture things and put them under glass for visual appreciation. And that's extended to what he does with Miranda. He doesn't, you know, want to have sex with her or anything. He wants her just to have her and to make her eventually, hopefully, want him. And Miranda sees this in her section of the book that she narrates, but she carries that farther as her section of the book comes to a close, and things begin to look rather bleak as the book goes on. She starts to have ponderings about rather theological matters, and she starts to wonder questions, as many people would in such a horrific scenario, about what kind of God could allow such things to come to pass in the world that he created. And so she eventually says something like, maybe we're just the collections of God. Maybe it's all just someone wanting to have something just for the sake of having it. It's very much kind of a nesting doll effect, whereas Frederick collects butterflies and then he collects Miranda, but then she contemplates that maybe we're all just the collections of some higher power that doesn't really care about us because all it wants to do is own us. It really takes its central metaphor pretty far, and I really like that. It's a very thorough book. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil what happens in this book if you haven't read it, but damn, that was a gut punch. Like, this book kind of just leaves you gobsmacked a little bit. It just kind of leaves you stunned, and it leaves kind of a nasty taste in your mouth. It really does. But I mean that as an absolute compliment. I mean that is in the best possible light that I can. This book is powerful. It is very powerful emotionally, and it's also stimulating intellectually because, again, I think John Fowles really was able to prefigure a lot of things that we have seen since then in society. In fact, I might point out that more than one serial killer and crazy person has actually kind of used this book as something of like a personal Bible almost. It has had real world effect. And I think that is a testament to how well John Fowles really hit the nail on the head when it comes to this book. But the ending was it was the icing on the cake. It was not a feel good ending, but it made sense and it really did kind of just bring things full circle. And again, it leaves kind of a bad taste in your mouth, but it lingers and it stays with you. So, The Collector by John Fowles. I'm giving this book the highest rating I can, and that is an A plus. This does not feel like a debut novel. This feels like a book written by somebody who had done it many times before and knew exactly what they were doing. Because John Fowles obviously knew what he was doing. This book is a stone cold modern classic, and for that reason, I am giving it an A plus. It is that good. So, The Collector by John Fowles. Have you read The Collector? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read The Collector, hell yes, I can recommend this. This book is a humdinger of a book, stone cold masterpiece. I love this book start to finish. It's a book that has kind of the plot of like a thriller novel of some sort, but it is absolutely literary with a capital L. It is that good. Pick it up if you haven't. John Fowles' The Collector is a masterpiece. I'm calling it A plus level work. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.